I cannot believe that I've been on YouTube for 2 years and I've never once done a full philodendron collection video. There was a time in the past where my philodendron collection was much bigger than it is now, but if you've been following along on this channel for the last like year and a half, you'll know that I've been paring down my philodendron collection quite a lot just because I find philodendrons a lot more high maintenance than almost any other genus. Actually, I think they are like the most high maintenance genus that I own. So over the last year, I've just been really selective about which philodendrons I keep in my collection. I've purged a lot of them. So in doing this video, I was able to go through my entire house and list out every philodendron I own. And I came up with 20. I only own 20 now, but I feel like that's like a nice round number to show in a video, and it's not like too huge of a collection to show all at once. And I honestly, in my head, I thought that I was like keeping certain types of philodendrons, but like looking at the list is kind of like there's really no rhyme or reason to it. But in general, I think what I'm ending up keeping now is plants that either have sentimental value to me for reasons that I will go into when I show the plant, or plants that don't produce a lot of EFN and burn through the leaves with the exception of one, or plants that don't get too unruly when they grow really big with the exception of one. Like I said, there's like not a ton of like rhyme or reason to it, but I'm trying going forward to only collect philodendrons that kind of fit that criteria. Some of the plants are quite big, some of them look quite nice, some of them look absolutely dreadful. So I think for the sake of like the flow of this video, I'm going to kind of alternate between like the nice ones, which it's kind of obvious those are the ones that I love more, I'm like putting the effort into, and then some that I think are just kind of like existing. So with each plant, I'm just going to tell you like how long I've had it for, how I've been caring for it, which should tell a story of why it looks the way it does right now, whether it's in a positive way or a negative way, and any kind of relevant story behind it, why I even have it in the first place and why it survived all the purges I've had over the last year. Also, if I sound sick, it's because I'm still sick, so I might be taking a few breaks while filming this video. We'll see. I have energy, but I get tired easily. I'm still kind of recovering. We are starting out strong. We're starting with my favorite philodendron in my whole collection. This is my Philodendron patriciae, and she is a thing of beauty. I've had this plant since 2021, I want to say. So if you watched Charmaine's philodendron collection video, she got the history of this a little bit wrong. So this was imported from Ecuador, but I was the one who got a cutting of it. She was the one who imported it. And I'll see if I can rummage around for a photo of when I first acquired it. It was like a mid-cut. I think it was a single node. It was in moss in a tiny little orchid cup, and that was when I first got my grow tent. So I just chucked it in there. It loved the warmth and humidity so much, and it just took off. And I actually grew it without a pole for quite a long time until it started to curve. Like the stem was curving in a weird way, so I eventually got it onto a pole. So this is one of those D-shaped clear moss poles from Northern Tropicals, except I filled it with a mixture of tree fern fiber and some aroid mix, like soil mix. It's in soil with like, it's pretty dense. It's very fine perlite in there, just because I found it to be quite a thirsty plant, and there's like a bit of a leca layer at the bottom, but it's black leca, so it's hard to see. It now lives in my exo here, which you guys probably have seen it a bunch of times. I just love her so much. This philodendron does not do any of the things that bother me about philodendrons, one of which is EFN. When I say EFN, in case anyone doesn't know, I'm sure you all know by now, but it's extra floral nectaries. So philodendrons are pretty famous for having that. They're little, you know, saplets of like sugary syrup that form mainly on the petiole and over the underside of the leaf, the abaxial. It's thought to be kind of like a stress response for philodendrons. They produce this so it will attract predatory insects to kind of eat up any pests that are on the plant. I find that philodendrons will do this a lot whenever I have them outside of a humid enclosure like a greenhouse, a tent, exo or something. They just start to produce a ton of EFN, and with velvety philodendrons particularly, I find it really burns through the leaves and it causes these like kind of orangey, just burny looking, and it starts to like bleed through the rest of the leaf, and it just kind of ruins the look. It almost looks like it has pests sometimes when it actually might not even have pests. It might just be stress from low humidity. The patriciae, I've never had that issue. Granted, she does live in an exo, it's just not a very high humidity exo. I would venture a guess to say that if I were to keep her inside my living room, she probably wouldn't be producing EFN like crazy. And the other thing I really appreciate about it is that the petioles aren't that long and the leaves just kind of drape so nicely vertically, even though the light that it's getting is above it. It's kind of forward and above it, but it's not right in front. And I find that a lot of philodendrons, I would say probably most philodendrons, will like lift up to face the light. But even on like the smaller leaves, which arguably don't have as much weight to like weigh it down vertically, they're still pretty vertical. It's just perfect. I cannot say a single bad thing about this plant. It's been such just an easy plant. It really doesn't shed leaves, even when it gets thirsty to the point where it's like drooping like spinach. Doesn't yellow leaves. I rarely ever get crispy tips. Like, okay, so this leaf is broken in half because it was a freshly emergent leaf, and I had brought it to Charmaine's house to film a collab, and it just kind of bent and broke in half. I tried to tape it together, didn't really work. I'm pretty sure this leaf was another casualty of transport. But yeah, looking at the leaves, like they really don't show any crispy tips at all. Maybe on the very, very oldest leaves, there's a little bit here and there. I think at one point this plant had quite a reputation for being a bit of a finicky philodendron, but that has honestly not been my experience at all. Granted, I did start it off in quite like an ideal condition greenhouse, like my tent, but over time it has like really acclimated down to exo conditions. But at the rate that it's growing and like at the size of the leaves that it has, I will have to move it out into my living room at some point. But I'm so confident that it will do fine in living room conditions, provided it doesn't get pests. Although, in saying that, it has had spider mites before, but I cannot find pest damage on it. It's like really tough. The only damage I ever see on the leaves are like maybe underwatering damage, like some yellowing on the edges. This is just my petition for more people to love this plant, because I don't see too many people talking about it, or I don't really see it on many people's wish lists. But at this point, they are so accessible, especially through Equigenera or Tropicals. So if you've been scared of getting a patriciae because you think that it might be difficult, I would try to get one locally, even if it's just a cutting. I have seen quite sad patriciaes coming in on imports, and they do take some time to come back. But then again, philodendrons don't do quite as well importing versus anthuriums, just because the root system is so fine. So this is the newest leaf on it. It's definitely the biggest I've ever grown. I'm just gonna back you up here so you can see. I did find spider mites in the exo while this leaf was just emerged. Like it was fully emerged and just pretty much just unfurled, so it was still expanding. So I just sprayed everything with spider mite knockout, and I was really concerned that this leaf was gonna like dry out and not form properly. I will say it's probably not 100% perfect. You can see a slight warp on this side, but really not as bad as an anthurium emergent leaf would have been. And it's now at the point where it's almost fully 100% hardened off, and it's got that beautiful, like super matte, ruffly quilted, oh, it's so nice. It's such a beautiful dark green, and I don't think this bleaches very easily. I don't think I've ever really bleached this plant. It doesn't get the strongest grow lights, but they're quite close to grow lights because I have it elevated up towards the grow lights, and it's getting quite tall. Yeah, there's not a single bad thing I can say about this plant. It's my favorite philodendron. It used to be the gloriosum, but the gloriosum I found has been actually quite more high maintenance than the patriciae. So this is my new favorite. I will be surprised if another philodendron ever dethrones this one. So that's a good segue to this next one, which is Philodendron heterocraspedon. It's not looking its best. So this is the other plant where Charmaine kind of got the story flipped. This is the one where I imported and she got the cutting of it. I'm gonna put in a photo when I first got it because it was the stuff of dreams. It was so beautiful. It was so big. I got it from Tropicals. I paid way too much money for this. This is one of my regrets in my plant keeping journey, is that I spent way too money trying to get a plant like really quickly when it first came to market. Not that heterocraspedon wasn't in cultivation, but it wasn't really, it was one of those plants where you had to know a collector and like you just had to know people to get it. And then suddenly Tropicals and Ecogenera had it. So the prices when they release these plants are really expensive. So my learning from that is that I do not get a plant when it's like first released, because you pay the price to be one of the first people to have a plant. So yeah, this one has definitely seen better days. I chopped the top off. I think I cut off like 3 or 4 leaves and I kept the bottom. That's kind of like what I like to do with my philodendrons when it gets too big. I just lop the top off and I start off over again with a juvenile plant. And I think I just underwatered it for a little bit, hence the kind of yellow halo around the leaves. I did get it onto a moss pole, and by moss I mean, actually this one is tree fern mixed with chopped up moss, bit of aroid soil. It's planted in tree fern soil, so tree fern fiber mixed with my aroid mix. It's in one of the same clear D-shaped moss poles. And it took a little while, but it has activated 2 growth points. It's 2 right here. I hope that they both grow. So I'll have like 2 vines coming out and I'll try to train them both to be on the pole. And we'll see if we can get back to this size pretty soon, because I really do love this philodendron. It's got such a beautiful, like super like ultra matte, almost like buttery matte. I don't know how to describe that texture. It's hard to see on this leaf because it is kind of yellow. Actually, I might have taken a photo of the top cutting of this when I sold it. It was like a really beautiful dark green, and it was just like, oh, such beautiful colors, and the veins are so numerous and quite flat. It just like, it's so beautiful. I don't think any other philodendron quite looks like this. So if you imagine this leaf but without that yellow halo and a little bit darker, that's what this plant would look like when it was in its healthier days. Although in saying that, it's not unhealthy. It hasn't grown a ton of roots since I potted this, and this would have been like, I want to say 2 months ago. The only active root I can see is right here, but it has rooted into the pole. Not a ton, but it has rooted into the pole. So my goal for this plant is to get it back to this size leaf by the end of this year. And I do think that in the spring, summer, it will kind of speed up. It used to live in my tent and it did quite well in that tent until it just got too tall, too big. I just needed the space for anthurium, so I moved it out here. It's just sitting right here usually. I think a lot of people will say the patriciae and the heterocraspedon are very even in terms of difficulty, but I would say patriciae to me has been like a walk in the park, and the hetero has been slightly more difficult. Not super difficult, but it doesn't root really quickly. I find the roots on the hetero are very like woody. They're like red, but really hard and wiry. And it's almost like tree roots. They're like, I don't know, I would compare it to like a dracaena or something. It's really strange to see that on philodendron, but it doesn't root that quickly. And I've tried to propagate it a whole bunch of times. I think I've lost more than half of my propagations. It's funny because the last time I chopped it, all the cuttings made it. And for those ones, I just water rooted them. So if you're looking to chop your hetero and you're looking for a way to root it, I would probably go with water. That worked way better for me than moss, pon. So for those last propagations, I rooted them in water. Once I saw maybe like only an inch of root come out, I potted it in pon and just continued rooting from there. I just have to remember to keep the water level very high when I'm transitioning from water to pond, so it's almost like it's still in water for a little bit, and then never letting that reservoir completely go down. Just keeping it super, super wet. Oh, and you're gonna see these little packets throughout this video. These are predatory mites for spider mites. Okay, so yeah, that's I'm getting out of breath already. That's my heterocraspedon. Let's just stick with some longleaf ones while we're at it. This one is one of my favorites, even though I've neglected it so badly, but it should be a testament to how easygoing this one is. This is my Philodendron bicolor. I recently repotted this in a video sometime over the holidays. It had been growing in like a little, like smaller than this little plastic cup in pon since I imported it. So I imported this Well, like I got it from an Ecuador pop-up, which was plants coming in from, I believe, Florida, because I don't know if Ecuador is selling bicolor. Maybe it is by now, but at that time it was coming out of the Florida location. And that was 2022. Yes, 2022, July. So I've had this now for a year and a half. It's not very big. It doesn't grow really fast, but I also haven't been giving it a ton of light or attention. It was in my tent, but quite shaded. It was kind of like in the back. It wasn't close to any grow lights at all. It took a really long time for it to root in that pond. I don't know if it's just like a slow rooter or it just didn't like pond that much, but it did take quite a while. So now I have it in tree fern soil, like a tree fern soil moss mix in the pole. I don't know if I see roots. I do see roots. Yeah, I do see roots. Oh no, yeah, there's one poking out the top here. I first learned about this plant from, he doesn't really make videos anymore, but I wish he would, James Armstrong's channel, Slug Plants. I think the bicolor was like his favorite philodendron or his favorite plant, and he would talk about it all the time, and I just thought it was so cute because of the two colors. A lot of philodendrons will have rhodobaxials. Like this will eventually fade over time, like an older leaf you see that's kind of going green. But what I love about it is that it has a two-tone petiole as well. It's like a fat, chubby petiole. It's just so cool. And the texture of the leaf, I would say, is very similar to heterocraspedon in that like ultra matte, ultra matte, like a nice dark green. And I just love that contrast. And I just love that it reminds me of Christmas. That's why I have this little polymer clay Santa hat in there. It hasn't thrown a fit since I repotted it and like immediately it lived outside of a tent. So I've got high hopes for it that it will grow nicely in room conditions, and I would like for it to size up. That would be really nice because I want it to be like when I first imported it, the leaf was this big. So wider for sure. I actually prefer the shape and overall like narrowness of the leaves that I've grown. I just want it to be like longer. And this is another plant where if you give it like a directional light from the front, it will face like really vertical. And I think that looks really cool, but I actually don't mind this like slight upward tilt. I think this is such an underrated philodendron. It was very hyped for a while and then it was just kind of like dropped off and nobody talks about it anymore. I really think that more people should own this because it's so adorable. And as far as climbers go, I don't know why. Like I hate moss poles. I hate the maintenance and like climbing philodendrons that like need extensions all the time and stuff. It really is not a part of the hobby that I enjoy and I get a lot out of, like the manual labor of it. There's certain things where I feel really almost like cathartic and therapeutic about it. But with like moss poles, I'm just like, please can we just like grow without a moss pole? This one has grown without a moss pole up until now. Up until this leaf, this very top leaf, and it started to get a bit leggy, so I just figured I definitely want to keep this in my collection because I think it's freaking adorable. So I'm gonna actually try with this one. But when it gets to the top of the pole, and I probably won't extend it, I probably will just chop the top off and maybe like take node cuttings of the bottom and just root them and sell them and spread the bicolor love. I don't know, I think this is so much cuter, or like so much more up my alley than other like two-tone philodendrons like mexicanum, Atabapoense, which is like more like, I guess, purpley on the back side. This one just does it for me a little bit more. Okay, let's throw in a sad one. This one is the only philodendron that lives in my tent, and you will see why when I show you which one it is. This one was a gift from Amanda. I guess her intention behind it was to give us a big challenge because she thinks, and probably rightly so, that this is the hardest philodendron to grow, size up, get it to look really nice. So this is Philodendron lupinum, and she's probably like, why the hell do you still have this plant? It's in exactly the same pot. Did I pot this or did she? I don't even remember. This is her cup though, and it's growing in the teeniest, tiniest little dessert cup in pond. It looks like soil. This is pond. I let it dry out all the time and it wasn't growing, like it wasn't unfurling its leaves down here, but for some reason And I think maybe it's because like I increased the feed very recently. I increased the dosage of TPS1 in the last 6 months, and it went through a little bit of a growth spurt. So these leaves are looking way more healthy. Tiny, don't get me wrong, but it grew a whole bunch. It just put out this leaf. So I don't plan on getting rid of it, even though this plant is kind of like ridiculous. I do plan on like letting it grow out a little bit more. I'm not gonna give it like a full-on moss pole or anything. If anything, I'll just put it into a bigger pot that can like support a stake and just grow it like that. I don't even want it to size up. I don't really love the look of the mature lupinum. I'll put a photo here. This is one of like the most crazy philodendron transformations ever. It just doesn't even look like the same plant. It's not even glossy anymore. It's got this like wolf head shaped leaf blade. But for how tiny this is, I have no issue just kind of growing it. Like it's off in the corner. It's just minding its own business. It's not harming anyone. So yeah, that's my lupinum, which I don't know if many people know I own this plant. It's still alive. You might look at this plant and be like, that looks like the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. And you might be right. Just bear in mind, this is not an easy philodendron. And even botanists and like hardcore aerators find this quite difficult, potentially even impossible to size up to that mature form in house conditions, in any sort of like man-made environment. So I'm gonna call this a win. So there once was a time, like I mentioned, where the gloriosum was my favorite philodendron of all time. And I still really love it. Like when I see a gloriosum, even just like at a shop, or like photos of a really mature, specifically like the white veins form or like the zebra type, it just captures my heart. I just love those humongous, round, veiny, dark green, contrasty leaves. I had made it my goal to grow one to maturity because I just like I couldn't get mine to size up. So in 2022, I think I succeeded sometime in 2022, early 2023. I grew it to maturity. It's not the most massive, like it was probably leaves about the size of my torso, maybe a little bit, I don't know, kind of like that. It was beautiful, and I just got so much joy out of it, and I chopped it up and I extended it, and it just kept trucking along, and then spider mites hit my home, and it just, the gloriosum joy just disappeared like that because the gloriosum is such a spider mite magnet. I still have that plant, but now she looks like this. This is that big boy that I used to just baby, and this just keeps getting spider mites. I chop all the leaves off, I treat everything, and then it grows another leaf. That leaf unfurls, and then suddenly spider mites are back, and they're almost always only on the gloriosum. This one was living in my living room under Russo lights, and it's like surrounded by alocasias, other spider mite magnets, but like this was the plant that all the spider mites were breeding on. It was covered in webbing. It was just so disheartening. So I'm just not sure if gloriosum growing is for me anymore, despite how much I love and loved this plant. I just think that I ran my course with it. I grew it to the size that I liked, and I got a lot of joy out of it, but I just don't think that until spider mites are just not even an inkling of a problem in my home, I don't think I want to grow it anymore. I did have another gloriosum. It was like a dark, kind of dark, veiny white veins form, but it had these like really tall lobes, like they're like bunny ears, and really white veins that kind of bled out, so it almost looked like they were glowing. And Charmaine calls that the Angry Alice gloriosum. I threw my last cutting out not knowing it was my last cutting, so I don't even own that plant anymore. And I don't know if I'm really sad about it. And I threw that cutting out because I was like, I had taken the top cutting of that plant to just root out and regrow from like a small little plant. And then when I was checking my water props, just that plant was covered in spider mites. Nothing else. All the other philodendrons in that cup seemed fine. The gloriosum just completely covered in spider mites. So I threw it out, and I didn't realize that was my last cutting. And I don't know if I want to keep this one. I have like probably 6 gloriosum like little props growing in my dome. I have the opportunity to change my mind, but I don't think I want to keep this thing more. I'm going to actually, right after I finish filming, I'm going to like spray down this emergent leaf just in case what I'm seeing is spider mites. And then I'm gonna let this leaf grow out. If there is no sign of spider mites, then I will sell it. And then that might be the end of my gloriosum journey. I don't know. I haven't decided. I'm like really wistful about it, but I just, yeah, I don't know. Okay, I think I'm gonna do this next one while I still have energy. This is my biggest philodendron, and I don't know what to do with it. Hold on. Here she is. Managed to get her through the door. So this is my Florida ghost, and this plant is a big problem. It is so tall. It's on a plank that is just struggling for its life. It's longer than my arm. These leaves. It's living in my guest bedroom, and it's growing quite well. It's under like a Sansi bulb, so I have like a floor lamp with a Sansi bulb, which is quite strong, just pointed directly at it. I don't know what to do with this thing. This is what I'm talking about for the EFN. I don't know if I can show you. This is a sticky guy. Luckily though, the EFN doesn't burn through the Florida plants so much. It's just like really sticky to handle it. But this is the biggest philodendron I own, and it's the only one that I've ever grown to flowering size. So this one has flowered for me in the past. I was like, maybe I'll just like self it at some point, but it just never produced a second flower after that, and I never collected the pollen. And this one also doesn't grow like super ghosty leaves. It like stays a little bit minty for a while, and then eventually will harden off to full green pretty quickly. But it's like, okay, so the reason why I still have this plant is because it's sentimental to me. I got this kind of at the very start of COVID. I didn't even know what a Florida ghost was. I didn't really even know plants, to be honest. I was really just getting into like more collector-y plants at the time, and I got it into my head that I wanted a lilac tree, and I got it during peak pandemic. When, you remember when like you would only be allowed to have like 3 people in a store at a time? So I was lining up with my boyfriend at this like local kind of shop, kind of boutique-y garden center called Figaro's. And I was like, I'm gonna get a lilac tree there, and then I'll just kind of shop around inside. So there's like an outdoor section, and then an indoor section with like tropical plants. So we were in the outdoor section in the rain. We were freezing cold, and we were waiting there for hours as like people were only being let in one at a time. And then I saw this little plant. It had like a nice ghosty leaf, and I thought it was really cute. So I just threw it in with the rest of my stuff, paid for everything, left. We got home, my boyfriend was like looking at the receipt, and he was like, do you realize this plant was $60? And I was like, didn't know that. And at that time, that was a lot of money for me to pay for a plant. Like I just didn't really understand the difference between like a more collector-y plant versus just like a very super available common plant. But I look back on that time with a lot of fondness, just because it was just a time of like discovery, not to mention the fact that he had to endure basically lining up for, I don't know, I think it was like 3 hours with me to get this freaking lilac tree, which actually is still alive and is flowering every summer, which is really nice. But yeah, I just I'm unsure of what to do, because sooner or later we're gonna come back to this again. We're gonna have these like 4-foot long petioles. We're gonna have the really sticky petioles, the sticky leaves. And I do realize it's really hard to show you this plant, so maybe I'll just put in some footage of it where it's sitting, because it looks a little bit easier without all of the busy background here. I thought maybe I would chop it right at the very top, right here, once this leaf hardens, and just grow it from a single leaf plant, and it'll probably revert back to like a pretty juvenile plant without that root system. Honestly, I wouldn't mind, but I think holding on to this plant, even though it's doing all the things that stress me out about large philodendrons, the EFN, the large petioles, the unruly kind of wide-reaching growth pattern, but I somehow cannot find the strength to just get rid of it. Even if I think about like chopping leaves just to kind of clean it up a little bit, the lower down leaves are so pretty. Let me see if I can get it closer to you. Like, that is so pretty, and it's so big. Here's another leaf with like the wings. It's just got that super mature Florida form, And with my Florida Beauty, when I grew it to like roughly the same size leaf as this one, it was quite big. I just chopped the top off and sold it. I did not want anything to do with that plant because it didn't really have the same sentimental attachment as this one. I only wish that this one would grow minty or ghosty leaves, but it's like very, very subtle. Oh, here's another big one. This one is at the back and it turns to face the light. Can I bend it? There. You can kind of see faintly that it's kind of minty. But yeah, this is a big leaf. I don't know if it's coming off on camera, but it's really big. It stresses me out in a way, but because it's not in my plant room anymore, it's not in my living room, it's in my guest bedroom. I only go in there to edit. Huxley goes in there to zoom every now and then. It doesn't bother me that much, I guess. But if I don't chop it, I will just get like another plank to kind of stabilize it upwards a little bit, because this plank is not, it was doing the job really well for a while, but it's just way too top heavy now. So if you look at the stem on top, almost going to be impossible to show you, but like how thick it is here. And then look at the stem at the bottom. It's right here. Look how teeny tiny it used to be. So yeah, I'm proud and scared of this plant. So that's all I got to say. Okay, so my other Florida family plant is my Florida Beauty. It's the one I keep chopping the top off, selling the top, like trying to decide what to do with the bottom. I don't know what I want to do with this. I think I might get rid of it though. And I might just sell the whole thing as is, although I will kind of repot it into a plastic pot because I don't want to, I want to keep the glass vessel, but I probably would do the next person a favor of getting rid of this moss and putting it on a moss pole or something, or maybe a stake. But this one keeps growing back really nicely. Like I just chopped the top off again a couple months ago, and this is the first leaf it put out. I'm just checking the variegation. It looks like it's not a ton, but there's like some on this side. I know it's hard to see before it's fully hardened, and there's a good amount on the bottom here. Again, kind of hard to see. This plant also used to be like one of my favorites in my entire collection, and I was so determined to get it big. And then when it got big, I was like, oh no, I can't deal with this. And this was the plant that made me realize that large philodendrons aren't really my vibe. I much prefer ones that either are quite manageable when they're large, like my patriciae, or just kind of stay small. And this is neither of those things. But yeah, like looking at this plant, I will never deny how beautiful the variegation is, because I just love how like marbly it is. I really like that it's yellow, because like it's yellow when it first emerges, and then it kind of hardens off to this like nice kind of creamy, like buttery yellow. I think it's beautiful, and I will always appreciate it. And I just am so in love with like the Florida kind of pedatum leaf shape. I can't figure out what this plant is supposed to be doing, like what it's trying to achieve with this shape. It just seems so like it's not necessary, and yet it's so striking. It's just this beautiful star shape, and the more mature it becomes, the more sides it has, and it just becomes like a lot more intricate. If things were different, I live in a bigger house that had more natural sunlight, I think I could grow a large Florida Beauty, Florida Ghost without issues. But I talk about this a lot on my channel, but I completely rely on grow lights in my home. Any plant that gets only natural sunlight doesn't tend to do that well, with the exception of one window, which is like the guest bedroom that I was talking about earlier. That window gets a good amount of light, so I can grow succulents in there. But unless it's right on the windowsill, like even if it's like 3 feet back, very little light. So I think in the house that we're currently in, not gonna happen. But if I'm thinking of like a future house I might have, I would love to have a sunroom, like a big sunroom that would just be dedicated to plants. Something like that would do great. And I don't think that it would bother me, but in this current living situation, nope. This one, on the flip side, is this a spider web? Yeah, it's a spider web. This one is actually, like, as far as I can see, with like much more mature plants, I think it does stay a little bit more petite. So I can see this lasting quite a long time in my collection. It's just so cool. You cannot see anything. Is there anything I can cover it with? My body? There, I think that's slightly better. I think this might have gotten spider mites lately, but not too bad. I do see a little bit of damage right here. But other than that, this one has been so easy. I was really concerned that like when I had this on my wish list that it would only grow in like a tent because it's so delicate, but people said they grow it in their living room and they were right. It grows just fine. It's just out here on this shelf. I put it on a pole like a couple of months ago and it's rooted into this pole. It's also in that like mossy tree fern aroid mix. Tree fern soil, like down the bottom with no drainage. I just realized I didn't tell you what the Florida Ghost and the Florida Beauty were. And those are just in like aroid mix without tree fern fiber. I potted that before I started using tree fern soil for everything. So this one, I do see myself growing for quite a long time. It's just so cool. It has that pedatum shape, just in a very exaggerated spindly form. And it's very reminiscent of another philodendron I love, which is the tortum. And it's quite low maintenance. I should have given this plant a shower before I put predatory mites on it because it's looking like a little bit dusty, but now I see it's covered in predatory mites. I don't want to kind of wash them away. Actually, while we're here, this pole needs water. Just gonna water that pole really quickly. One very, very last thing I want to mention about this is when I got it as a present from Jing and Charmaine last summer, it was in a dessert cup, so it was like this big, kind of like a Jello shot cup. It was in tree fern, and I moved from that to this, so it was like this big to this big, which is like way bigger than I would normally pot a philodendron. I think philodendrons are better with like very incremental upsizes versus like what I've been doing with my anthuriums, which is like jumping up big pot sizes. I just wanted it to match the pole, to be honest, and I was like, I don't want to repot you again for at least another year and a half. So that's what we got, and it hasn't been too bad. Like, it hasn't thrown a fit, but I don't see a ton of root growth on the sides, although there is quite a bit of algae now. But it so far has been okay so far, and it is growing new leaves. Okay, so when I said earlier that I'm not keeping any plants that are super burny with EFN, this is the exception. I feel so bad about this. Okay, so first of all, this one is in my collection and I don't plan on getting rid of it because it was hybridized by my dear friend Amanda. So this is a hybrid of Scott Morianum and Bet Waterbury, formerly known as 69686. So this is what it looks like, okay? Put it on your wish list. This used to live in my exo, which I converted into like a propagation exo. And this was just like so tiny. It was down at the bottom. It wasn't getting any light and it was growing really tiny. So I was like, I'm gonna do a nice thing and like take it out, put it up on this shelf, get it like nice and bright. And it responded by just producing the world's biggest supply of EFN. Like, okay, so look at this leaf and how much it's burned. It's all the speckles on the front. Now look at the back. I'm gonna need to catch the light in order to show you. Do you see? It's completely covered top to bottom in EFN droplets. I honestly did not expect that response from this plant. If I had known that, I would have moved it from that exo, which is quite high humidity because it's completely sealed at the top, to like one of these exos, which is not sealed at the top. So it would be like an incremental decrease in humidity rather than move it straight into like ambient conditions. But honestly, I just recently repotted this into a bigger cup with tree fern soil. There's pond at the bottom. I do see new roots forming. This was really only like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago maybe. And I want to see how this new leaf forms. It would be like maybe the second leaf growing out in ambient conditions, and we will see. I gave it a little stick, and I really want to keep this because like a philodendron hybrid is not, it's not easy. Certainly not compared to like anthuriums. Anthuriums just, it's a lot more easy to get that window of pollination, whereas philodendrons, the flower structure is a little bit more complicated. There's like a little, I don't know what the terminology is because I never really studied it too much, but there's the top where the spadix is, and at the bottom there's like a little kind of, you know, chamber, and you almost have to like cut a window into it, and that's where the pollen is. And you have to do it at a certain time of the day, and it produces heat. It gets really hot at some point, and it's not easy compared to anthuriums. And philodendrons are a lot harder to get to flower than anthuriums. So I recognize all the hard work that has gone into this because her Scott Morganum is freaking massive. I think she's planning on donating it to like a botanical garden or something. But to get like 2 philodendrons to get to maturity and cross them, it's not an easy thing. And I do cherish this plant for that reason. I just really sad that this happened. To my knowledge, it didn't have spider mites. It just hated the low humidity. It might have had spider mites, but it wasn't to the point where it was like webbing and I could see it really clearly. It's possible it had like some spider mites on it. It's got like kind of red margins. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it. It's like a very glossy, just straight green. Over time it will develop ears. I'm curious to know whether any of the specimens have the Bet Waterbury like 69686 lobes, that shape, ever come in. It would be really cool to see. It's just crazy how much EFN is on this. I don't know if I'm catching the light, but it's like I sprayed it with hairspray and it's like a fine mist all over the leaf. Okay, so this one is another philodendron I plan to grow for the foreseeable future. This is Philodendron burle Marx Fantasy. I've always loved this plant so much and it's so cute and so delicate and so tiny. So this one I repotted, like I chopped the top off my main plant. It was like this pole to the top and then it had grown past the pole. So I just took that top cutting. That's what I kept for myself. The rest I just sold it. And I was water rooting it and it had all these water roots, but it had like kind of lifted out of the water. So all the roots had shriveled and they were, I don't think, even very viable. But I potted it up in tree fern soil anyways, but I just kept it a little bit heavier on the tree fern. And then I put it on another pole that has tree fern, moss, aroid mix. And I honestly didn't know if it would be okay because it didn't really have a root system. I put more of the stem into the substrate and I'm actually a little bit surprised that it did not throw a fit whatsoever. Being out of water, it was pretty soft when I got it, but now the leaf has like kind of gotten its like turgid, perky feeling back. It hasn't grown a leaf since then. I think that I did this in December, but I just think this is one of like the prettiest terrarium philodendrons. I say like terrarium in quotes because I'm not sure if it really does need super high humidity. I just grow it in an exo because it's like so teeny tiny and I can give it nice conditions that way. I think it's quite an easygoing and quite a quick growing philodendron, but this is one of those philodendrons that must have a pole because if you don't grow it on a pole, it will vine, get super leggy, and the leaves are about the size of a grain of rice. So it's just like, it really does need a pole to actually have any sort of discernible leaf. And I think it's just so pretty. It's so elegant. It's so drapey. It just like hangs so nicely vertically. It's got a really beautiful blue tint and the way those veins go is so elegant to me. I don't know how to describe like the overall kind of leaf. I don't know, what would you call that? It looks like little cells. It almost looks like digitized. Try not to get the glare from my light. But it's so pretty. I don't plan on ever getting rid of it unless I was to move out of the country, at which point I might just be like, might not be worth trying to bring this in, but I really want it to grow leaves like this big. I think it would be really nice. I've seen pictures. It seems as though the ones that are being produced in the States have an easier time of getting really big. I don't know if it's just in my head, but I see these really big ones. I think it was Steve's Leaves that was selling them and they were really massive. They were at least probably bigger than the size of my hand. And I was like, I really want to grow a burle Marx Fantasy to that size. I just don't know if like any bigger than that, if I'll still like it. Even if it doesn't get much bigger than this, like I would love at least a little bit bigger like that. That would be perfect. Actually, that would actually be exactly what I want. That would be my goal for this plant, and just keep like growing it up a pole, chopping it, potting it back down. But I just think like this is such an easygoing plant, especially if you have something like an exo to put it in. I probably water this thing every 6 weeks. It doesn't drink that much and it just keeps growing. It's just a really nice easygoing one. But if you don't have it on a pole that it can actually like root into, like it's not gonna be satisfying in any sort of way. Like this one was starting to get that direction because this was growing like here off of the pole and it was starting to size down. But this was grown, I think, right at the top of the bowl. Okay, switching it up randomly to a plant that I'm not sure if I'm gonna keep, but I once had big hopes and dreams for. This is Philodendron glorious. Here's my beautiful specimen. This is actually a plant from Charmaine. This was her last ditch effort for me to like fall back in love with glorious, because at one point I was just obsessed. Like, we were both obsessed. Part of it was because, once again, James Armstrong, he had a really huge glorious. Like, the leaves are probably like this big. It's like full maturity glorious, and he was growing it inside his grow tent. And I was never able to get mine that big, although I didn't try that hard with like the moss pole maintenance. But I fell out of love with it, because as soon as this thing gets out of a greenhouse, right now this one lives in an exo. As soon as it gets out of the greenhouse, the EFN just goes out of control and it burns right through the leaves, and the leaves look really just like splattered and like almost like bleached. Like almost like you threw bleach on it. So this one I potted in pond and no drainage, and I'm gonna give it a bit of water actually. I just don't know if this is the plant for me, because I don't grow philodendrons in greenhouses anymore. I try to kind of grow them outside, and whichever ones can do fine in living room conditions, those are the ones I'm trying to keep. So I think I might actually sell this one. Part of the reason why I'm so over glorious is because working at North Shore Tropicals like once a week, Lauren has just glorious spilling out of every single nook and cranny of that shop. I think even prior to the pandemic, she was getting glorious in, so she had a lot of mother plants, and those get propped. They get sold, but then like they get too big, so we chop them up into single nodes again. They're just multiplying at a rate that there's just no end in sight for the glorious. And I just find that like I got so sick of looking at them, even though once upon a time I just thought they were the cutest little, I mean, this is not a good representation of glorious, but it has such an easygoing way about it in a lot of ways, because I want to say for all the hundreds of propagations we take, it's almost like 100% propagation rate, like a success rate. It was just glorious overload for me. So when you're exposed to hundreds of glorious all the time, you get really sick of it. So I honestly think that I'm not gonna keep this once I get it to grow out a few more leaves, maybe one more leaf. But that's what's left of my glorious hopes and dreams. Another one I had really big is my Jose Buono. So I got that one as a birthday present from Jing and Charmaine, and it grew huge and it was majestic. It was growing just right here. It was such a fast grower, super reliable, and the variegation was really nice. And then it just got way too big and it was like toppling over. So I chopped it up, and this is what I'm left with. This little baby here. I sold the top cuttings, and I think I might have some like leafless stumps in my dome somewhere. I'll see. I'm pretty sure I have a couple in there. So this is the bottom stump, and it has bounced back so fast. This is the newest leaf. It's pushing out another right there. Speaking of plants that my friends wanted me to give a second chance to, this is my Philodendron majestic. Isn't she majestic? So this was a plant where like Lauren was chopping up a majestic, and she was like, this is a really nice top cutting. Why don't you give majestic one more chance? And I took it home. It took a long time for it to root, because I didn't put it in water right away. So I had it like just like a fresh cut with no roots out in the open, finished my day, drove home. So in that time, the leaf just went like, this is a plant where if you're going to propagate it, just get it straight into water. So it took a while, and then I don't know what happened. I've been kind of neglecting it, to be honest. It's in pond. At one point it was sitting on the floor and it just kept getting knocked over. So it was just getting a lot of, hardships thrown at it, and it probably tried a couple of leaves that didn't quite work out. I know this one definitely shriveled off where it could unfurl, until it finally pushed out this leaf. And then now it's working on this one. I think I might cut it to about here and just reroot it again, just because this stem is kind of ridiculous, and then maybe pass it on to the next person. Because majestic, I find this plant so beautiful. Like, I love that soderoy like silver, but it's velvety or like sub velvety, and I really love the redness on the backs. I think it's such a beautiful philodendron. I just don't want to be the one to grow it. It's a cross between soderoy and varicosum. I definitely like it better than varicosum. Do I like it better than soderoy? I think soderoy is so cute because it's so pillowy. I also don't own a soderoy anymore. No, I think I like it just as much as soderoy, but soderoy and majestic both have this thing where they get bleached really, really easily. So you almost have to grow it in the dark. So I have it kind of not under grow lights, or like they're far enough away from grow lights that it doesn't count as being under a grow light. It's kind of close to a window, but that window doesn't receive a lot of light because there's quite a big roof extending over top. Not that anybody asked, but I have it in quite low light, but any brighter than that, I feel like it would just bleach it right away. My friend had a grow tent. She was growing her majestic. Like it felt like it was growing in the dark. It was like as far away from the grow light as it could possibly be. Like the grow light was like a really strong one at the ceiling, and it was down like diagonally away from the grow light, shaded by other plants, and it was growing perfectly. Like really nice big leaves, nice compact growth pattern. So it really can do well with like quite low light. And actually being out in living room conditions, I don't even see a single speck of EFN on this. So now I'm second guessing myself. Do I want to grow it or do I not want to grow it? Let's do a few trailing ones. This one I showed in a video a couple of months ago. This one is my Philodendron Rio. It has looked better in the past, but the reason why I repotted it and chopped it up a little bit is because it was starting to get so pale. So when I first got it, it was a single leaf, two single leaf, well actually no, it was 3 single leaf cuttings, but I lost one of them for some reason. So this is grown out from 2 single leaf cuttings, and there's only 2 stems in the pot right now. And the leaves were really nice color. It was darker than this for sure. It was just like a really nice dark green with like that beautiful gray and the white, but it was in my tent. It was a really small pot and it was completely root bound in there. And I honestly think that was the reason why I was starting to go a little pale. So I potted into a bigger pot, but honestly, I probably could go up a size. It's in pond and no drainage. And my idea was like, I think I prefer this plant if it was trailing. I just love trailing hederaceum. I actually prefer hederaceum trailing than like a nice really big one growing up a pole. It's definitely impressive when people can get a hederaceum like huge, like leaves the size of my torso. I just don't think that I would enjoy it that much in my home. I just think they trail so nicely, and they're one of the few philodendrons that trail nicely, so why not let it trail? And it's way more easy to maintain, and it just got a really nice like curtain effect versus like doing all the moss poles for it. This one has started growing since the chop. I think these 3 leaves grew since then, and it's not that dark. Honestly, I think I might get it into soil and get it into a bigger pot because I don't really have anything bigger than this in terms of glass vessels. But I really, really like this. In terms of like the Brazil family, this is the one I think is the prettiest. I think this is prettier than the Gabby for sure, mainly because it's got such a fun leaf shape, and like every leaf kind of looks different. So a lot of them will have like the classic hederaceum like heart shape, but then like you'll also get ones like this, like a really elongated, almost like smeared. I also really like this leaf, this one right here. I just think that it's like a really special mutation that the Rio has. Along with the variegation that it has, it doesn't have yellow, it just has gray and white. It's so pretty. And it grows pretty fast. It grows just as fast as my Brazil and probably as fast as my micans. That's not saying a lot because my micans gets like almost no light. You're gonna see soon. It looks a little bit messy right now because there's tons of aerial roots that grew inside the tent, which aren't gonna do anything. So I might actually just clean it up and like pull some dead sheets off and just cut those aerial roots off because they're not gonna root into anything. But yeah, this one just grows now on my shelf, just right up here, not in the tent anymore. I really only had it in the tent just to root them out and to get it started, but it just ended up staying in there because it was growing so nicely. But yeah, if you come across a Rio for like a good price, I really highly recommend it. It's so pretty. Speaking of Brazil, I do have a Brazil. This is my Brazil. It grows in my living room. It's quite leafy, but the leaves are quite small. So I was growing it in quite low light for a while. I think probably in the last 6 months I got into higher light, and then it was getting like kind of bigger down here at the bottom. But I recently just chopped off one, I don't know, maybe a foot of vines, but I kind of kept this vine. I was feeling a bit wistful about cutting this off because it was starting to actually like get bigger leaves despite being kind of hanging down at the bottom. And it had put out this leaf and I thought it was so cute. It was so heart-shaped in that like big burst of yellow. I really like how Brazil like new leaves have that like peachy tint. But yeah, this one is still in my collection. Charmaine's gonna be like, what the hell? Why do you still have that? This one's a plant that I actually got from Charmaine in 2020 before we even really knew each other that well, but she was doing a Facebook purge and she was like $5 and I was like, sold, I'll buy it. And I don't know if I actually potted another stem into here. This might be that one cutting that she sold to me in 2020, or might have one other stem potted together with it. But yeah, this one is a really low maintenance one. I think I prefer it to the do I prefer it to the full green hederaceum? It's tough. I think maybe I do. I think. Just because there's just like natural variation from leaf to leaf to look forward to. Like sometimes it has like more yellow, sometimes it's just like green, and sometimes it just does fun stuff like this. It is really pretty when you just isolate that one leaf. That's really, really pretty. But yeah, you guys have seen Brazils like a million times, so I'm not gonna blabber on about it. Third and last hederaceum is my micans. It's not the most beautiful micans you've ever seen. So this one is a series of propagations. I had started them off as, I'm just pulling dead leaves out. I started them off as single leaf. They might not even have had leaves on them, just like wet sticks that I rooted in moss. They were growing leaves and I potted them into a cup, and then it had trailed out really nicely. I'll put a photo here what it looked like. And I was just like so enamored by how far it had come from just being sticks that I potted a few more together. Okay, this is gonna be, yeah, this is too much to do while talking. I potted a few of them together into like a massive vessel in pond, no drainage. And the idea was that I was not going to unpot it again for like ever, unless it started to have like a huge meltdown. But this gets grown in almost no light. So this is also in my guest bedroom. It's on a shelf, kind of a wall shelf, but it gets no grow lights. So in summertime, it gets a good amount of light. So I expect it to come back. What I will do before summer is give it a good chop at the bottom and just let it fill out over the summer. I'm not going to do anything to it before then, but in the winter time, it gets nothing. I want to say it probably gets like 10 foot candles, if that, of natural light. But there's not very many spots I could grow something like such a long trailing plant. So it's just going to have to hang tight until spring. It'll get more light and it'll look better. But these are a series of propagations that come from Charmaine's mother plant. One vine actually on this side. I actually want to deal with this. It's alive. No, I'm just gonna cut it right now because when I'm in that room, I'm always just staring at that one vine with dead leaves. There's no live leaves on it. I'm just gonna cut it right here. As I said, I was not going to chop it, but this one did not root so well at the beginning and it dropped all of its leaves. Yeah, there's like some parts of it that look okay, but for the most part, it's like the teeny tiny baby leaves that's like starved for light. It's not the best specimen you've ever seen. There's quite a lot of leaves. There's a lot of micans to prop from, but yeah, I'm just gonna hope that it holds on until summer. But one reason I know that it really is not getting a lot of light, well, other than having eyeballs, is that I water this thing probably every 2 months. It just really doesn't drink. It just doesn't need that water. And look at the growth back here. This is like as far away from the light as you could possibly get. And they look like micro greens that you put into a smoothie. From a distance, when I'm like editing, I'm like, oh, that's nice micans. But now that I'm looking at it up close, I'm just like, oh, that's sad. But I keep this because micans is my favorite hederaceum variety, bar none. I will always have micans in my home if I can help it. It's just like the most beautiful trailing plant. If you can get it like under good light, not too much light. I think like maybe like between 75 and 100 foot candles, I think would be a good spot for it to keep green, rather than turning that pink sunstressy color, which I think actually looks quite unhealthy on a mican. Some people like that pinky color. I personally like it when it's like this like dark green and all of it's like that with those like red backs. It's so pretty. It's so pretty. Another plant I'm growing in that same room, except this one's much closer to the window, is my Dean McDowell. She's such a cutie. This one I imported, I think in 2021. I think I might have chopped her at least once. It's growing in no drainage in like one of these Muji file boxes, they call it, in pon. A mixture of the Pon perlite, orchiata, there's leca at the bottom. I very seldomly water this because it doesn't really get that much light. I'm just doing a quick pest check while we're here. Because this one is a spider mite's, you know, one of the spider mite's preferred snacks, but it seems to be okay. But it probably could do with a little bit of a wipe down just to get it cleaned up. This one, it's in a spot where like in spring, summer, it gets quite a bit of light, especially on sunny days. It will get some hours of direct sunlight from the window, but in the winter time when there's cloud coverage and there's like a lot of evergreens in front of it, so like the sun just doesn't go where it needs to go to hit this plant. It gets very little light, so it really doesn't grow that fast, which is completely fine by me. I really like the size that it's at right now, and I really don't want to fuss with like chopping it, getting into a new pot. I just find that quite laborious because like you chop this, like let's say you chop it to like this much stem and you try to root it into another like crawling style vessel. You have to stabilize it with a bunch of stuff. It's just like a lot of construction and MacGyvering that I don't love doing. So I'm happy that this one's growing like a leaf every, I don't know, 3 months or something like that. But this one, it pushed out near to the end of summer. It's just poking out a new leaf right there. I hope you can see. But it was like a good size, honestly. I think it had spider mites for a little bit. That's why it's looking a little bit pale. But yeah, I'm actually gonna pop this into the shower when I'm done filming because I do think it could do a little bit of shining up. But it's doing well and it's such an easygoing one. So the Dean McDowell is, as most people will know, a hybrid between Passasanum and gloriosum. So it was originally hybridized by John Banta in Florida, but he named it after his friend, whose name is Dean McDowell. His friend died of AIDS. So I think there's like a special story behind this, but also at the same time, I think it was such an improvement upon the Passasanum. Personally, it looks so much like Passasanum, except it just has puffiness, like a pillowy texture. It gets a little bit of pink from the gloriosum. You'll see it especially in the midrib. It'll have a slight tint of pink in the back, but you do have to catch it when it's like a fresh emergent leaf to see it. Otherwise, it just hardens off fully green. And I just think it's a little less gangly than Passasanum. And I find Passasanum, I mean, no offense to the plant, but it's like a little bit underwhelming because the overall leaf blade is a little flat. But the Dean McDowell has that puffiness that I just find is so adorable, like, because it looks so fat. You just want to lay your head on it. So this one has actually survived the purges. If you had asked me 2 years ago whether I'd be getting rid of my Dean McDowell first or my gloriosum, I would have been like, obviously my Dean McDowell. But this one has actually stood the test of time a little bit more than gloriosum. I think because this one got lucky, it's in a spot where it doesn't get like the light conditions that makes it grow really fast, but it's enough light for it to produce leaves of this size. And it hasn't been destroyed by spider mites. It's had spider mites before, but it doesn't show the damage nearly as much as the gloriosum. So like by wiping it down and treating for the spider mites, you can kind of reset it. Whereas for the gloriosum, that leaf just like will forever look ugly. So yeah, I love this plant. I don't talk about it a lot, but I see it every time I edit because it's like 3 feet away from me when I edit. And I just appreciate this, these heart shapes, these cute little heart shapes. They're just like so bouncy, so puffy. It's just so, so cute. Okay, so this one has seen better days, but this one is my Philodendron SB Columbia, now known as El Guapo. This was the first one I ever had. Sorry for the mite packet. Not that it's covering the most pristine leaf, but that's what it looks like. And here's another leaf that did the curl back thing, which I think is light related. So I also used to have one like with the tight venation. So if you watch Charmaine's channel, you'll have seen the one with like a lot of veins coming out. This one is less numerous for sure. I recently sold mine that I had imported from Tropicals, and I kept this one because this one again has sentimental value to me. This one was a birthday gift from my boyfriend. It's just, I was so excited when I got this. This was my #1 wishlist plant at that time, and he had to, like, you know, talk to Charmaine, ask her for suggestions on what plant to get me for my birthday. And then he drove up to Northern Tropicals and met with Lauren and bought it from her. And I know at that time these things weren't cheap, so I will be holding on to this for dear life until such a time that, like, I can't bring it with me when I move or something like that. I just need to figure out a lighting situation that it doesn't get bleached, because I find this plant bleaches quite easily. It doesn't take as much light as a gloriosum can. I think it can take a little bit more than majestic, but not by miles. So this one is under Russo lights. It's not really close to Russo lights, but close enough that the edges are kind of getting a little bit bleached. Definitely on this one. And it's lost a lot of that silvery sheen, that silvery kind of healthy sheen that it could have. I do like this specimen quite a lot because it's kind of narrow. I do have a strong appreciation for the ones that are really wide, super round. That's what I fell in love with in the first place with this plant, but I also really like this like narrow one, and I like the way that this one, compared to the tight veins one, I mean, where the veins kind of fork out at the edges. I think that looks really kind of striking and kind of, yeah, just striking. So this one used to live in a coffee cup. So this cup, and I moved it into a glass vessel that was much deeper. It had a whole bunch of stem above the substrate. So I was trying to like root it higher and just wait for it to start crawling. And at that point, I will hopefully be able to chop it and then get it into a crawling pot. But for now, it just lives in this vessel, and I think it has rooted pretty well in the pond, so I'm guessing that it has rooted at that node right under the substrate there. Overall, not a pretty low maintenance plant, except that it does produce EFN a little bit more, and it does burn it slightly, but the burns I find kind of stay on the backside, so you'll see more of the damage when you flip the leaf over, but it doesn't come through to the front of the leaf as much as like a gloriosum would. This one definitely took its time since the repot to push anything, but it looks like it's almost ready to push a leaf out of this caterpillar. It's been swelling up over the last couple of weeks. I have been watching it. Oh, I completely forgot one more hederaceum variety to show you. This is my variegated hederaceum. It's not looking very impressive right now. I chopped this, I want to say 2 months ago, into single node cuttings. I had a little tiny plant that I got from Charmaine, and I was training it up a pole, and then it grew off the pole. It was growing pretty fast actually, and I was just like, I'm kind of over the pole for this plant, so I just chopped it up, and I'm rooting some out to sell, and this is my pot that I made for myself. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves in here, 5 cuttings, and I see roots in here. I don't see growth. Oh no, I do see growth points. Yeah, this is a work in progress. So this is sitting under lights in like my propagation area. My goal for it to have a nice trailing pot. That's why I stuffed 5 cuttings in there, because I wanted to look nice and bushy and full, because it would look so cute. I will say I probably, if I was to rank my hederaceums that I own, so I own 4. There's Brazil, Rio, micans, this. I would probably say micans at the top, even though mine's really sad looking, then Rio, then this, then Brazil, in terms of my favorites. Not that this is a favorites video, but I think the variegation on it is like really cute. Looks like a marble queen, epipremnum. It's not my favorite type of variegation, but I can appreciate that it does look pretty cute, I guess. Like kind of when it's like really full like this can be pretty satisfying. But I would much prefer something like marbly. I think that would be so amazing if there was a marbly type of hederaceum. They're probably creating something like that in Thailand somewhere. But if eventually something like that comes to market, I would be very interested. But for now, quite enjoy this one, and I'm working on getting a nice full bushy pot. Okay, I think we are at the last plant. Let me double check. Yes, we are at the very last plant. I literally repotted this yesterday. I finally got it Okay, it was in a square nursery pot, tree fern soil, or just tree fern. Might be just tree fern in drainage, and it was growing up a plastic stick. And I finally got my act together, put it into a proper pot, proper pole. I'm very proud of myself. Thank you very much. A couple months ago, along with my hetero and a lot of other plants, I chopped the top off this. So I think I chopped off like 4 leaves or something. It was growing kind of like leggy up top, which was kind of, I mean, it was surprising because it was so close to the light at that point. It was growing in my exo here, and it was like almost at the very top. So I was kind of confused why it was getting so leggy at the top, but I chalked it up to it needing a pole, but I didn't want that leggy bit, so I just chopped those up into single node cuttings, and I sold a couple. But this thing took forever to start a growth point. I'm not even sure if you're gonna be able to see it. This little red guy here, the little red jujube. So now it's potted into tree fern soil. Look at the bottom, a mossy soil tree fern mix in the moss pole, and I'm hoping it roots into it because I would like for it to stay really nice and compact, because I really liked it when it was like this. I was so head over heels for this plant when it was like this, and then it started to get leggy and I was just like, ew. So I chopped it off, but I'm just starting that back over. It'll probably revert back to like something quite tiny from this growth point. Probably not that tiny because it's a pretty mature stem up here, and it has a massive root system in this pot. So I'm guessing it won't take too long to get back to like about this size. I love this plant. I don't think I love it as much as Charmaine does. Honestly, I don't know if anyone loves tortum as much as she does, but I do really like it. I don't ever plan on not having a tortum. It doesn't annoy me. It doesn't produce EFN. Like looking at it right now, I don't see any EFN. It grows quite nicely in room conditions. I used to be convinced that it needed to grow in a greenhouse just based on my friends' experiences, because they had one, I think it was acquired from someone who had it in a greenhouse, and they tried to grow outside of a greenhouse, and then like it would not emerge out of the caterpillar. So I was just convinced it needed to grow my tent, and when it grew too large for my tent, I moved it into my exos to make room for some anthuriums, and it continued growing fine in an exo, which is quite a bit less warm, quite a bit less humid as well compared to my grow tent, and it's been totally fine. And then out here, also totally fine. Although in saying that, it hasn't really grown a leaf since I moved it out here. So before the chop, it was in the exo, chopped the top off and then moved it down here. And since then, it's just kind of been a little bit dormant, and only very recently in the last, I want to say 3 weeks, pushed that little red growth point. But there's something very satisfying about watching that like pinky peachy leaf come out, all scrumpled up, and it just like one by one releases each one of these little like fronds. They're not fronds, but you know what I mean. And expands quite a lot once it comes out of the caterpillar, because this leaf, if I remember correctly, would have been about that big when it came out of the sheath. But I want to say this is one of my most rewarding philodendrons. It certainly doesn't look like a philodendron, but it grows like one. It's easygoing, and it can grow in like almost any conditions, I want to say, with the exception of super cold. So I've mentioned this before, but if you're growing tortum in outdoor conditions, if there's like any sort of cold snap, get it inside. I've seen photos of people like asking what happened to my tortum, and they were growing it in an outdoor greenhouse, and what had happened was that there was a cold snap, like an overnight cold snap, where the temperature suddenly dropped, and then the tortum would just drop all of its leaves right at the petiole. So almost looks like someone took scissors and chopped every single leaf off at the base of the petiole, and you're just left with stem and like a perfect pristine leaf laying on the floor. It's like a really weird thing that tortum does. I don't know how extreme that temperature drop needs to be, but I would probably, if you're in that climate where you can kind of grow tropicals outside, I would be careful about leaving it outside when there's any sort of coldness, like as the seasons change or whatever. Yeah, if you're transitioning from a cold season to like a warmer season, I would wait till it's like fully in the warm season before moving it out. I have zero complaints about this plant. It is so easygoing. It's so fun. I do think I will continue to lop the top off every now and then, maybe like once every, I don't know, 12 to 18 months. But I don't see myself having a collection without the tortum because it's so fun. This leaf shape is just awesome. It's so much better than a palm, in my opinion. I just love how horizontal this is. Like, it's not like a palm might be more like coming out more diagonally upwards, but this is like super, super horizontal. It's like a right angle. And I think that lends itself to the overall charm of this plant. I really like how the petiole is kind of ridged down here. It's not fully round. The leaves themselves aren't that delicate. It's definitely a little bit sturdier than the polypodioides, even though they look quite similar in some ways. And it's just so quirky and so fun. And I actually think they do quite well with pests in the sense that, like, yes, it would be hard to wipe them down because these leaves are, there's so much to wipe down without wrecking one of the leaves, but at the same time they don't show the pest damage as much as like a heart-shaped philodendron. They're just worthy of a lot of love. But yeah, in saying that, it's still not my favorite philodendron. That award goes to patriciae, but it's really up there, and that's why it's potted in this vessel, because when something's potted in this vessel, chances are it's not going anywhere. I got through all of that without taking a single break and I actually feel okay. I know I sound kind of stuffed up. I don't know, it sounds like that to me. I feel really like just ugh, but I'm getting almost better. I just need to get rid of this little bit of congestion. I think I'm in the clear. If I need to miss another day at the shop because I'm sick, I'm going to lose it. In 2024, I don't plan on acquiring any more philodendrons that I already have. They're really not my focus right now, but in saying that, I still have quite a strong love for philodendrons. It's just like I've come to the realization that I can appreciate them from afar and not be one to own one. But when I come across a beautiful philodendron, whether it be at Northern Tropicals or in my friends' collections, I still, like, my heart still stops at the beautiful leaves, and especially like a really nice variegated leaf or like a very big leaf. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna go eat something now. I love you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Mwah!